Hercule Poirot, the famous Belgian detective, solves a theft at Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre in 1934. The obsessive-compulsive, who dreams of balancing things in life. He is organized to the point that for breakfast he has to eat 2 eggs in proportion, otherwise he will not be able to eat. His eyes can't see something imperfect without fixing it. Regards his ability to see a lie in the midst of truth as a curse. Hercule would like to rest in Istanbul and take a break from his job. There is a malfunction in the boat he is traveling in, so he sits down and waits for it to be repaired. But he gets a message from his boss who tells him that he needs to return to London for another case. Boak, the director of the Simplon Route Orient Express service, was his friend. So he books for him a ticket on the luxurious Orient Express. There was no tickets for the first class, but Hercule agrees to stay at the economy level. Other passengers include American widow Caroline Hubbard, American businessman Edward Ratchett, with his English manservant Edward Masterman and secretary Hector McQueen, elderly Russian Princess Natalia Dragomirov and her German maid Hildegard Schmidt, Hungarian diplomat Count Rudolf Androny and his wife Elena, physician John Arbuthnot, Mary de Benham, a governess, Pilar Estravados, a Spanish missionary, Cuban-American car salesman Beniamino Marquez, and Gerhard Hardman, an Austrian university professor. And as he enters the train he meets Mrs. Caroline Hubbard and she starts talking to him about her past relationships. He continues his way searching for room number 3, which is his. While talking to himself and saying that number 3 is an ominous number. As he enters his room he finds out that his roommate is Mr. McQueen, who is the special assistant of Mr. Ratchett. As the Orient Express moves, Mr. Ratchett finds in his room a threatening message that says, "You better watch yourself." Ratchett offers to hire Hercule as his bodyguard with a salary $10,000 per week, as he is an art dealer and he has a lot of enemies. But Hercule didn't accept Ratchett's offer. Ratchett pulls out a gun and threatens Hercule, but he still didn't care. Hercule later notices someone in a red kimono running down the corridor after hearing strange noises coming from Ratchett's compartment. The train's engine is derailed by an avalanche, stranding the passengers. Hercule tries to open the door but it's locked. Hercule discovers Ratchett was murdered during the night after having been stabbed a dozen times. At different random places and with different forces, as if the killer wasn't looking while stabbing him. Hercule was confused. Why didn't Ratchett defend himself while he had a gun and his body is full of caffeine, which means he was awake? Poirot smells the cup of coffee beside Ratchett and notices a smell of a famous drug. Hercule immediately understood that Ratchett was anesthetized. Boak asks Hercule to investigate this case because when the police comes he will choose the killer randomly, and of course he will choose Dr. John Arbuthnot because he is black. Mrs. Hubbard claims that a man had been in her compartment in the night. As repairs begin, Poirot and Boak investigate the other passengers. Hercule discovers a partially burned note linking Ratchett to the kidnapping of Daisy Armstrong, a young girl who was kidnapped from her bedroom and held for ransom. Daisy was murdered despite the fact that her family paid the ransom. Ratchett's true identity is revealed. He was Daisy's kidnapper and murderer, John Cassetti. Her mother Sonia died as a result of the shock of Daisy's death after giving birth prematurely to a stillborn baby. Her father, Colonel John Armstrong, then committed suicide. Suzanne, the family's nursemaid, was wrongfully accused of complicity, leading to her arrest and subsequent suicide in police custody, only to be exonerated posthumously. More evidence is discovered, including a blood-stained handkerchief written on it the letter H, and, in Mrs. Hubbard's compartment, the button of a conductor's uniform. The uniform is later found, as is the red kimono, in Hercule's own suitcase. Hubbard is fatally stabbed in the back but cannot identify the assailant. Hercule discovers that many of the passengers have direct ties to the Armstrong family and delves into their hidden histories. Hercule is shot in the shoulder while interviewing de Benham by Dr. Arbuthnot, who claims responsibility for the murder, but Boak stops him from killing Hercule. Hercule realizes that Arbuthnot, a former army sniper, never intended to murder him. Hercule confronts the suspects outside the train, offering 2 possible explanations for Cassetti's death. The first is straightforward but does not cover all of the facts. At a previous stop, a murderer disguised as a conductor boarded the train, murdered Cassetti, and fled as the train left. The second is more complicated. Every single suspect was somehow connected to the Armstrongs, Suzanne, or her trial, and they all had a vendetta against Cassetti. McQueen's father was the district attorney in charge of the kidnapping case, and he was under pressure to prosecute Suzanne and send her to prison, only to have his career ruined when the truth was revealed after her suicide. Colonel Armstrong's Batman during the war, and later his valet, who also served as butler to the Armstrong household, was Masterman, who is terminally ill. Dr. Arbuthnot was Colonel Armstrong's comrade and best friend. Countess Androny, née Goldenberg and real name Helena, was Sonia Armstrong's sister and Daisy's aunt. Sonia's godmother and mother's friend was Princess Dragomirov. Schmidt was the Armstrong family's cook. Count Androny was Sonia's brother-in-law. Marquez was the Armstrong chauffeur. Mrs. de Benham was Sonia's secretary and Daisy's governess. Suzanne's brother was the train's conductor, Pierre Michel. Hardman, real name is Cyrus, was an American former cop who fell in love with Suzanne. Estravados was Daisy's nurse. Linda Arden, a former stage actress and aspiring director, as well as Sonia's mother and Daisy's grandmother, is revealed to be Hubbard. Hercule predicts that they acted together, and there's a scene of Michelle knocking on all of their doors, and then they are all gathered in Ratchet's room and each one of them stabs him differently, and the force of the stabs appears from each person according to the amount of pain he suffered because of Ratchet. Hubbard confirms by admitting that she planned the murder and had enlisted the assistance of everyone else. All the other passengers and Michelle took turns stabbing Cassetti. De Benham wore the kimono. Arbuthnot stabbed Hubbard without endangering her life, to convince Hercule of a lone killer. Hercule dares the passengers and Michelle to shoot him with a confiscated gun in order to prevent him from revealing their plot. Boke can lie, but Hercule, obsessed with truth and balance, cannot. Hubbard grabs the gun and tries to commit suicide, but it is empty. Hercule was interested in how the suspects would react. Hercule concludes that justice is impossible in this case because Cassetti deserved to die. For the first time, Hercule will have to live with a lie and an imbalance. He presents the lone killer theory to the Yugoslavian police, allowing the other passengers to board the train. A British Army messenger asks him to investigate a death on the Nile as he disembarks. Hercule agrees to take the case. I haven't read any Agatha Christie books, but I enjoyed the movie. It has an excellent staff. The costumes, sets, and filming are all undeniably beautiful, and the film will undoubtedly win an Oscar for its visuals. The end.